All right, guys, I'm here today with Andrew Bolter from the Vital Pursuit to talk about the importance of three-dimensional training and why golfers should be doing it. All right, guys, Andrew Bolter, thank you for coming down to Orlando, Florida.
Thanks for having me.
First off, the term 3D training, what is it?
Yep, so 3D training, probably something you guys are starting to hear in the industry a little bit more. It's basically just training that is utilizing all three planes of motion. So we're talking frontal plane, sagittal plane, and transverse plane.
Okay, so for example, I think it's a good description is you always hear people referring to the bench, the squat, and the deadlift. Yep. Okay, so those are very linear movements that are all happening in kind of one plane of motion.
Correct.
Now, there are a ton of strength benefits to that, obviously, but does that necessarily make you a better athlete, and why?
So, this is obviously controversial, but like Josh said, those big three, the powerlifting movements, certainly add strength, and they certainly get you better at those movements. Now, because they are linear movements, meaning they only are working through one plane of motion, the amount of contextual carryover that they actually have to an athletic sequence, like say a golf swing, which is extremely three-dimensional, are gonna be limited. So the carryover, there may be some, but it's gonna be less than if you're actually integrating some sort of 3D rotational training.
Okay, so as a coach, and even someone who continues to evolve my own craft, I am, for myself, very aware or proprioceptive aware of how I can move my body, okay? And it continues to evolve. Some days it feels better than not, especially when I'm not working out a lot. I feel like I don't have as good of awareness, but especially for the individual who comes and doesn't really have good awareness of how they're moving their trunk. If there aren't elements of rotation or moving through different planes of motion into the programming, it might not make them actually swing better at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, becoming a good golf, having a good golf swing, the better the mover, the better the swing. So a good example of this, and I think the easiest example to kind of correlate to the viewers at home is like the row and the press, okay? And obviously, you know, we do some rowing and some pressing, you know, like push-ups and stuff like that. But the foundation of what we do is a lot more unilateral or contralateral in a sense that if we're rowing, it's a row with rotation. So we're incorporating the element of actually rowing and turning our trunk, connecting our body to the ground and understanding how that all ties in to move our body more efficiently. Expand on that. Talk about that, and because I think that's the best example that people can roll out. Why do people want to do more of a rotational roll versus like a bilateral roll?
Sure, so if you're doing like a bilateral row, what you're essentially doing is you're using some of your back muscles to essentially move that weight up and down. Now, if you think about sprinting or swinging a golf club, the back muscles need to be used in coherence, coordinated with the legs, the hips, the core, the shoulder girdle. The entire body coordinates that movement together. So when you're coding, when you're doing kind of that, let's say a bent over row, you're not enhancing your ability to rotate and utilize those muscles in that sequence. If you do more of a unilateral row with some contralateral reciprocation, big words, basically just meaning the opposite arm is doing the opposite thing, that's allowing you to actually utilize your body with its sling systems, which we'll get into later, but that allows you to leverage your body's natural performance much more easily.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important topic. I mean, essentially adding the elements of rotation. There's a big, I would say, divide in the fitness world. Some people say you shouldn't work on rotation, and some people say you should do a lot of anti-rotation. For me, what I found works best is having a lot of elements of rotation. I feel my body responds kind of the best to that. Obviously, within the rules of kind of the framework of how he lays it out. But yeah, so let's dive deeper into your training. So when you're looking at dysfunction in the body, it typically will start with a gait assessment, correct? So you would basically kind of look at someone's walking patterns. And then basically based off how they're walking, you can identify from that where people might have issues.
Yes.
And then within that, talk about how you incorporate the 3D training into the correction of those issues.
So like Josh alluded to, when I first meet with a client or an athlete, we're gonna do postural assessment, just looking at their standing structure, and then more importantly, we're gonna assess their gait cycle, meaning their walking and running form. From there, that's gonna help start giving me insight into how their structure has dealt with distortion. So people are really adaptable. Obviously, they're getting through their life, but they can still have distortions that are reducing their ability to perform optimally. So where the 3D training comes in is the 3D training actually allows us to operate on a spectrum all the way from corrective exercise to performance enhancement. So the 3D training will allow us to kind of unwind some of those distortions, get you back to a more neutral posture, so that when you start moving dynamically, it's through a much more efficient range of motion.
Love it. I love it. And so let's talk about this topic. So, you know, a lot of times you'll see very good athletes, okay, and I'm not going to name any names,
Sure.
but they'll go, well, I saw so-and-so deadlifting, and I saw so-and-so doing this, okay? I can tell you that myself, when I did that, it led to having issues, okay?
Yes.
Because, and where I was going with the posture, not to kind of bounce back and forth, was that with golfers, you identify a lot of dysfunction in golfers, okay? Because it's so rotational, they create a lot of asymmetries in their body. So loading stuff in the sagittal plane, you're not really reaping the benefits of a lot of those movements, and a lot of times they can lead to injuries. And so what we're seeing in the golfing world is you see a lot of times people, and don't get me wrong, they have their place, and if your bodies are great, sure, you can do them. They didn't work for me. And so, you know, if you see a very good athlete doing a lot of stuff, they have a lot more leeway, right? Because a lot of times their patterns are already established, and they can get away with a lot more, I don't know what you want to call it, but a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, I can expand on that a little bit, because I think this is a question that I also receive a lot. So you see, like Josh said, there's a lot of high-level athletes that are doing a lot of traditional training, and I think a lot of people are attributing their success to that training. I would argue that they may actually be succeeding in their sport in spite of their training. What Josh said earlier about them having those patterns so heavily wired, they've been playing their sport for so long, and they also naturally are moving so well that they're much more durable to these movements that are potentially limiting or even destructive for people that aren't doing them well. So there's kind of this two prongs where you, one, need to be executing the movement very, very well, and two, it needs to have contextual relevance. For the athlete that already moves super well in their sport, the relevance is less important for them, and they're probably doing the movement with really good form. For most of us, we just aren't built to do those movements well, and they can break us down. And that's where having movements that allow us to correct some of the dysfunctions we get from playing our asymmetrical sport or from sitting at a desk all day is really, really helpful.
Okay, so let's play the flip side of that. So let's take the athlete, the non-professional athlete, or the person who hasn't had success at the highest level. Okay, I'll put myself into that category. Someone who was trying to evolve my swing. There was obvious movement limitations of where I needed to get to. And going that route led to, for me, it was a little bit destructive. So talk about the opposite side. So talk about why someone like that scenario who's trying to make changes in their patterning, who don't have a very sound fundamental, what would be the benefits of training more in this 3D standpoint?
Yeah, so the 3D training definitely allows us to hone in on certain dysfunctional parts. Now, the whole body is connected through fascia. So for Josh, let's say his shoulder wasn't working very well, his shoulder complex wasn't working well, that's gonna have repercussions all along his body. Most likely his opposite hip and foot and knee are all gonna be affected. So when we train in this three-dimensional fashion, we're actually allowing the body to work through the positions of compensation and actually start to adjust them. Whereas traditional training is so linear that the positions don't ever lend to being corrected because you're not moving through the ranges that are already distorted. So with Josh, when we get him into one of these complex positions, we can try and actually refine the position and enhance it. instead of just patterning on top of it.
So a good example of this was I had some serious issues with my shoulder.
Yep.
Like my rowing mechanics were garbage.
Yes.
And so, to say it lightly, and so because I was basically compensating through the shoulder girdle, I wasn't correctly being able to get to my obliques to actually rotate correctly.
Yes.
So that was something that I had to practice, something that I had to work at, something that I still don't have mastered, but have made tremendous gains on. And as I get further into it, my body starts to feel better. The swing starts to become easier. I'm able to sequence it up and hit positions that I, see some of the best doing that I, haven't been able to achieve in the past.
Exactly.
So that's a perfect example of kind of like the opposite side of the spectrum. And obviously, like, relative to what I'm doing, I understand I'm not on the PGA Tour, but as far as, being clubhead speed and being a long drive, or, competing in long drive,
Yep.
along with coaching, I'm, one of the fastest to walk this earth. So there is the flip side that, hey, I'm not deadlifting, I'm not squatting, but I'm still able to have success.
Absolutely.
You just kind of, at the end of the day, figure out what works for you and take an honest inventory of where your body's at.
Absolutely.
Agree?
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is we're actually going to jump into the gym, and we're gonna show you some examples of what Andrew means by 3D training and why those can benefit you. All right, guys, we're here in the gym, and we wanted to give you a few examples of these 3D movements that Andrew was talking about that you could potentially add to your programming.
So we're gonna first start with some rowing progressions, then we'll move into some pressing progressions, and then we're gonna combine them into a push-pull combo, okay? We'll start easiest and we'll progress in complexity on all three of these variations. So with the row, starting bilateral, okay? Adding complexity. Adding a little bit more complexity. Okay, final variation. All right. Show you some pressing variations. Now we're going to combine the two. More power-based.
Yeah, so when you look at this, as you can tell, there's so much rotation involved in this.
Yep.
When I get out of the gym doing stuff like this, I feel like I can actually move. Historically, when I was doing everything very linear, I felt like I'd get out of the gym, if I wanted to rotate, it's like it wasn't happening. So that's where having things like this, there's such a carryover, and for me, it was almost like you're getting mobility and strength work in at the same time, versus like having to have a hour and a half session in the gym and then go follow it up with an hour and a half mobility session to undo what you just did. I feel like you get the most bang for your buck with this style.
Exactly. It's this stuff is mobility and strength training together. They're two sides of the same coin, and if your movement doesn't respect that, you're going to feel like Josh said, you're going to walk out and not feel capable. You want to do these things and make you feel like you're ready to perform at a higher level.
And the reality is we're all aging, okay? Like we're all getting older. And there's a point where like we're going to pay a price. The way I see it is doing stuff like that, invest long-term in your body. It's going to keep you sustainable. As we always talk about on this channel, the two things that keep people competitive golf, being able to actually move and being able to swing it fast. It keeps us the most competitive. So let's show them a few more exercises. We're going to jump over to the Landmine, and I think they'll really like that.
Sweet, let's do it.
All right, guys, so here's the Landmine. This is a tool that we've used pretty heavily. I found a lot of benefit in that. I think at the end of the day, it allows you to kind of keep incorporating a lot of the concepts that we've been talking about, being dynamic, being able to move through different planes of motion. Show them a few exercises with this that is referencing exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, right on. So I'll show you guys some movements that'll mirror some of the movements you saw earlier, also movements you can load up a little bit heavier to add some of that strength. So we're gonna start with a pressing movement similar to what you saw on the cables, starting here, pressing up. Okay, you can add a lot of variation, all of these movements. Okay, squatting, you can also hit this. Okay, you can also target rotational movement. You can also do almost like a full clean and jerk. So very versatile tool to use.
Yeah, so a lot of those moves, a lot of strength based, but you could also, as you alluded to, a lot of power elements too.
Absolutely.
So, like the way I kind of see that last move that you performed, as you called it, the clean to press.
Yep.
It's very rotational versus a traditional clean to press is pretty much just working in one plane. Exactly. So for me, I see more benefit of stuff like that. But awesome, and you can kind of see that even though it's not the traditional deadlift, squat, press, stuff like that, you can still get pretty strong. I mean, when we're doing this, we're loading these up. I mean, you're getting very explosive. I mean, I load 4 plates up on the squat move, and I feel more benefit than a traditional squat because I could actually get to ranges of motion that I normally wouldn't be able to get to. So really good. Let's jump over to some dumbbell stuff, and then we'll wrap it up with that. All right, guys, we're gonna lastly show you some dumbbell variations that I love. These are some of my favorites. We're gonna do some different lunge variations, also some lateral hopping.
Yep.
Take it away.
All right. So we'll start with some lunging variations. Again, a ton of variety here, but I'll show you a couple that Josh really enjoys and I enjoy myself. So. All right, we'll get into some lateral movement next.
All right, so he went full Spider-Man mode on us. I know a lot of those look a little bit complex, but the reality is they're just sequences, yep. Okay? And there's 2 takeaways from that. A lot of the things I talk about in the golf swing, it's understanding how to move through a different sequence, okay? And when you're learning stuff like that, it's just little sequences that once you get it, they click. They're not as hard. There's obviously complex to it, sure. But it's not like anyone can't learn them.
No, anybody can do it. Yeah.
And so the other thing that I love about that is when you start to get dumbbells and kettlebells swinging, is you start to understand how to leverage your body with the principle of momentum, okay? So in the backswing, I'm very big on understanding how to get your body moving to get the club head swinging. A lot of time that's a difficult concept to kind of correlate because the club head's so light and it leaves a lot of room to then power it with your arms. Doing a lot of stuff like this, you start to understand how to leverage your body that much more efficiently. And so like I said, if you're double dipping in a sense that you're working on principles in the gym as well as on the course, that's why I see a lot of value in kind of this style of training, and I see this sort of being the future of all athletics. So Andrew, great video. I think the viewers will really enjoy that. If you don't, I apologize. I think it's good. Very informative. You guys can check out Andrew on Instagram at _vital_pursuit. You can also check out his website, thevitalpursuit.co. That is TheVital PURSUIT.co. And we'll put a link for that in the bio. If you guys want some merch, we do got some black long sleeve shirts available with the holidays around the corner. It is a great gift. It also helps keep this thing going, so I do appreciate the support. Other than that, we got 3 more awesome videos planned for you in the next few weeks with Andrew, so looking forward to seeing you there.